Why thoughts get louder after dark. During the day, your attention is busy. Sounds, movement, tasks, conversations. Your brain is constantly responding to the outside world. Even when you don't notice it, your mind is working outward, tracking, predicting, adjusting. But at night, most of that slowly disappears. The room becomes quieter. The lights soften, movement slows, and when external noise fades, internal noise becomes noticeable. This is often when people say, "My thoughts get louder at night." But that description is slightly misleading, because the mind isn't actually becoming louder. What's changing is where your attention goes. During the day, your brain is occupied with what's in front of you. There's always something to respond to. A message, a sound, a decision. Your attention is pulled outward, and your thoughts follow. At night, that pulling stops, and when attention is no longer needed outside, it naturally turns inward. Not because something is wrong, but because that's what the mind does when it's finally not needed elsewhere. Neuroscientists often describe this shift as the brain moving into a different mode, a quieter one, a reflective one. It's sometimes called the default mode of the mind. This is the state the brain enters when it is not focused on tasks, problems, or external demands. It's the mode of remembering, of imagining, of replaying. The mind gently wanders, not aimlessly, but meaningfully. During the day, this mode is constantly interrupted. At night, it finally has space. And so thoughts appear, not new thoughts, not louder thoughts, just thoughts that were already there, waiting. This is why nighttime thinking often feels personal. Memories return, old conversations replay, questions that were postponed during the day quietly resurface. It can feel sudden, as if the mind chose this moment. But really, this moment chose the mind. There's another reason night thoughts feel more intense. At night, there's less contrast. During the day, a thought competes with sound, light, movement. At night, there is very little to compete with, so even a soft thought feels large, like a whisper in a quiet room. This is also why emotions often feel stronger after dark. The brain processes emotion more openly when it is not busy managing the outside world. Without distraction, feelings don't need to raise their voice to be heard. They're simply present. Many people assume this means they should try to stop their thoughts, to distract themselves again, to force silence. But the mind doesn't become calm by being pushed away. It becomes calm by being understood. When thoughts appear at night, they are not asking for solutions. They are asking for acknowledgement. They want to be noticed, not fixed. This is why resisting night thoughts often makes them stronger, and why gently allowing them often makes them fade on their own. Not because you did something, but because they were finally heard. Think of it like this. All day your mind has been working for you. At night, it finally speaks to you. Nothing about this is dangerous. Nothing about this is broken. It is simply a natural shift in attention, a change in direction from outward to inward. And once you understand that, nighttime thoughts become less mysterious, less threatening, less loud. They are no longer interruptions. They are signals. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when distractions disappear completely and why the mind feels the need to fill that empty space. What happens when distractions disappear? During the day, the mind is constantly occupied. There's always something asking for attention, something to respond to, something that needs to be done. Even moments that feel quiet are rarely empty. The brain is still scanning, predicting, preparing for what comes next. But at night, many of these demands quietly fall away. Messages stop arriving, conversations end, movement slows, and as distractions disappear, Something interesting begins to happen. The mind does not become blank. It becomes open. The human brain is not designed for emptiness. When external input decreases, internal activity naturally increases. This is not a flaw. It is a function. The brain is a predictive system. It is always trying to make sense of what might happen next. During the day, that prediction is guided by the world outside. At night, the world offers very little. So the brain turns inward. Without distractions, the mind begins to review, not deliberately, not logically. It revisits unfinished thoughts, loose ends, emotional fragments, things that did not have space during the day quietly return. This is why nighttime thinking often feels unstructured. One thought leads to another. Memories appear without warning. Ideas drift in and out. The mind is not losing control. It is reorganizing. When distractions disappear, the brain takes the opportunity to integrate experience, to connect moments, to revisit meaning, to check for unresolved signals. This is similar to what happens during dreaming. The difference is that at night, before sleep, consciousness is still present, so the process feels louder, more noticeable. Many people interpret this as overthinking, but what's actually happening is something much more ordinary. The brain is catching up. During the day, the mind prioritizes action. At night, it prioritizes understanding. It asks quiet questions. Did that moment matter? Was something missed? Is something still unresolved? These questions don't demand answers. They simply pass through awareness. This is also why trying to distract the mind at night can feel ineffective. Scrolling, switching between apps, filling the silence. These actions add stimulation but not resolution. The mind remains alert because the underlying process has not finished. It has simply been interrupted. When distractions disappear, the mind is given permission to slow down. But slowing down does not mean stopping. It means shifting from doing to processing, from reacting to reflecting. This is why night thoughts often feel repetitive. The brain revisits the same themes, not because it is stuck, but because repetition is how it organizes. Each pass softens the emotional edges. Each return reduces uncertainty. Over time, the signal loses its urgency. This process cannot be rushed, and it cannot be forced. The more the mind is allowed to move freely, the less it needs to insist. Understanding this changes the experience of nighttime thinking. Thoughts are no longer interruptions, they are transitions, signs that the mind is moving from external attention toward rest. In the next chapter, we'll explore why memory becomes especially active at night, and why certain moments from the past seem to appear only when the world becomes quiet. Nighttime and memory, surfacing. At night, memory behaves differently, not because the brain suddenly changes, but because the conditions around it do. During the day, memory competes with the present moment. There are tasks to complete, conversations to follow, details that require immediate attention. The mind stays anchored to what is happening now. At night, that anchor loosens, and when it does, memory begins to drift upward. The brain does not store memories like files. It stores them as networks, connected by emotion, by meaning, by unfinished understanding. When the day is busy, those networks stay quiet. When the night becomes still, they activate. This is why memories at night often feel unexpected. A small detail appears, a face, a voice, a moment that seemed unimportant at the time. These memories are not random, they are emotionally tagged. The brain remembers what mattered, not what was loud. At night, the mind has space to revisit these emotional signals, not to relive them exactly, but to integrate them, to place them into a broader story. Memory surfacing at night is often gentle, but persistent. It doesn't arrive as a clear narrative. It arrives as fragments, a feeling without a clear reason, a moment without a beginning or end, a question that never quite formed during the day. This can feel unsettling, but it is part of how the mind maintains balance. The brain is always looking for coherence. During the day, coherence comes from action. At night, it comes from reflection. Memory becomes the material the mind uses to understand itself. This is also why nighttime memories often feel emotional. Emotion and memory are deeply connected. They share the same neural pathways. When emotional processing increases at night, memory naturally follows. Some memories return because they were never fully processed. Others return because they carry meaning that is still unfolding. And some return simply because the mind finally has time to notice them. It's important to understand something here. The mind does not bring back memories to disturb you. It brings them back to resolve tension, to soften edges, to complete unfinished emotional movements. This is why memories often change when they return at night. They may feel less sharp, less urgent, less demanding, or sometimes clearer, as if the mind is viewing them from a distance. Trying to push these memories away often strengthens them, not because they are stubborn, but because avoidance signals importance. When a memory is acknowledged, it often loosens its grip, not immediately, but gradually. Nighttime memory surfacing is one of the mind's quiet repair mechanisms, a way of stitching together experience, a way of maintaining emotional continuity. This process does not require effort, it does not require analysis, it simply requires space. When the world becomes quiet, the mind listens to itself, and memory is the language it uses. Silence is not empty. Silence often feels like the absence of something, the absence of sound, the absence of movement, the absence of activity. But to the brain, silence is not empty. It is unfamiliar. The human brain evolved in environments that were never truly quiet. Even at night there were sounds, wind moving through trees, distant animals, fire settling into embers. Silence, as we experience it today, is relatively new, and the brain responds to it in a very specific way. When sound decreases, the brain does not relax automatically. It becomes more alert, not because there is danger, but because it is listening more closely. The brain fills silence with expectation. It begins to predict, to scan for subtle changes, to notice internal signals that were previously masked by noise. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable at first. In the absence of external sound, internal sound becomes clearer. Breathing, heartbeat, thought, even the faintest sensation becomes noticeable. The brain is always interpreting. When it receives less information from the outside world, it increases sensitivity on the inside. This is not anxiety. It is attention without direction. For some people, silence feels peaceful. For others, it feels heavy. The difference is not personality. It is familiarity. When silence is familiar, the brain recognizes it as safe. When it is unfamiliar, the brain treats it as uncertain, and uncertainty invites awareness. This is why many people prefer gentle background sound at night. Rain, a fan, distant traffic, a low hum. These sounds do not distract the mind. They give it something predictable to rest against. Silence, when softened by consistent sound, becomes less demanding. The brain no longer needs to scan. It no longer needs to fill space. It can simply observe. True calm does not come from eliminating sound. It comes from predictability, from knowing what comes next. This is also why sudden silence can feel jarring. When sound stops abruptly, the brain momentarily increases alertness. It asks a simple question: what changed? But when silence arrives slowly, when sound fades gently, the brain adjusts. It releases tension. It stops waiting. Over time, silence becomes less noticeable, not because the mind shuts down, but because it no longer needs to interpret it. Silence becomes a background, not a signal. In this state, thoughts slow, not because they are forced to stop, but because they are no longer competing with anticipation. Understanding this changes the relationship with silence. It no longer feels like something to endure. It becomes something to move through. In the next chapter, we'll explore why familiar sounds feel especially comforting at night and how predictability helps the mind settle into rest. At night, the mind looks for stability. When vision fades and movement slows, sound becomes one of the brain's primary reference points. Not loud sound, not stimulating sound, predictable sound. The brain is constantly trying to answer one question: what comes next? During the day, the environment provides many answers. At night, those answers are fewer. So the brain becomes more sensitive to patterns. Familiar sounds offer something important: consistency, a steady rhythm, a repeating texture, a known presence, rain falling at a constant pace, a fan turning at the same speed, distant traffic moving without interruption. These sounds do not demand attention. They reassure the brain that nothing has changed. Predictability signals safety. When the brain can predict the next moment, it reduces alertness. It stops scanning for threat. It relaxes its grip on attention. This is why unfamiliar or irregular sounds feel more noticeable at night. A sudden noise stands out. The brain responds immediately. Something changed. But when sound remains consistent, the brain learns to ignore it. Not because it disappears, but because it becomes trustworthy. Familiar sounds also reduce internal noise. When the brain has an external rhythm to align with, internal rhythms often follow. Breathing slows, heart rate steadies, thoughts soften, the mind synchronizes. This is not a conscious process. The brain does this automatically. It entrains to rhythm, just as it does with music. This is also why people often return to the same sounds night after night, the same rain recording, the same background noise, the same familiar environment. Novelty keeps the brain alert. Familiarity allows it to rest. At night, the brain does not seek stimulation, it seeks reassurance. There is also an emotional layer to familiar sound. Certain sounds are connected to memory. A train in the distance, a storm outside a window, the hum of a house at rest. These sounds carry context. They remind the brain of times when it was safe enough to let go. Over time, the brain learns to associate these sounds with rest. The sound itself becomes a signal, a message. It is safe to slow down now. This is why silence often feels easier when paired with sound. Not because silence is removed, but because it is framed. Sound becomes the boundary. Silence becomes the space within it. When familiar sounds are present, the brain no longer needs to monitor the environment. It shifts attention inward, gently, without urgency. In the next chapter, we'll explore why reading prepares the mind for sleep and how focused, predictable attention helps the brain transition into rest. Why reading prepares the mind for sleep. Reading changes the way the mind holds attention. Unlike scrolling or watching, reading moves at a single pace. It does not flash. It does not interrupt itself. It does not ask for reaction. The mind follows one line at a time. And that matters. At night, the brain is sensitive to stimulation. Bright images, rapid movement, and unpredictable content keep attention alert. Reading does the opposite. It narrows attention gently. When you read, the brain enters a focused state, not intense, not demanding, contained. This kind of attention reduces mental noise. Instead of many thoughts competing, the mind moves along a single path. Stories are especially effective. They provide structure without pressure, a beginning, a middle, a sense of direction. The brain no longer needs to search for meaning, it is guided. Reading also shifts the brain away from problem solving. Unlike tasks that require decisions, reading allows the mind to receive without acting. This reduces cognitive effort, and when effort decreases, the nervous system follows. There is also a difference between reading and screens. Screens encourage scanning, jumping, skipping, reacting. Reading encourages continuity. The brain settles into a rhythm, page after page, sentence after sentence. Familiar books are especially calming. When the story is known, the brain does not anticipate surprise. It relaxes into recognition. This is why many people reread the same books at night. The goal is not discovery, it is comfort. Reading also engages imagination. But unlike visual media, imagination is self-paced. The brain controls the imagery. This creates a sense of safety. Nothing moves faster than the mind is ready for. Light plays a role as well. Dim, steady light signals evening to the brain. As brightness decreases, melatonin production begins to rise. Reading in low light gently supports this transition. Over time, reading becomes associated with rest. The brain learns the pattern, book opens, attention narrows, body slows. Eventually, the act itself becomes a signal. It is time to let go. Reading does not push the mind toward sleep. It leads it there, without force, without urgency. This is why reading feels different at night. It does not stimulate the mind. It gives it somewhere gentle to go. In the next chapter, we'll explore how slow music changes perception at night and why rhythm plays a powerful role in helping the mind release control. Slow music and night perception. At night, time feels different. Moments stretch, thoughts linger. The mind moves more slowly. Music interacts with this shift in a very specific way. The brain does not hear music passively. It synchronizes with it. Rhythm becomes a reference. Tempo becomes a guide. Fast music keeps the brain alert. It increases anticipation, raises heart rate, encourages movement. Slow music does the opposite. It reduces urgency. It creates space between moments. When music slows, the nervous system often follows. Breathing deepens, muscles release, thoughts lose their sharp edges. This is not imagination. It is physiology. At night, the brain is especially receptive to rhythm. With fewer external cues, internal timing becomes more flexible. Music gently shapes perception. Seconds feel longer, pauses feel fuller. The mind begins to drift. Repetition plays an important role here. When a melody repeats, the brain learns what to expect. Expectation reduces effort. Effort reduction leads to relaxation. This is why simple, repetitive music works best at night. Not complex structures, not sudden changes, steady patterns. Slow music also affects emotion. Lower tempos are associated with safety. The brain interprets slowness as non-threatening. Nothing is chasing. Nothing demands response. At night, this emotional signal matters more. Without visual stimulation, sound becomes the emotional anchor. Music fills space without filling attention. This is also why instrumental music often feels easier at night. Without lyrics, the brain does not need to process language. It can rest inside tone and rhythm. Over time, the brain associates certain music with rest. A familiar melody becomes a signal, a cue. The moment it begins, the body already knows what to do. Music does not make the mind sleep, it gives it permission. When rhythm slows and repetition settles in, control becomes less important. Thoughts loosen, attention softens. The mind no longer needs to stay organized. In the next chapter, we'll explore how dim light changes the way we think and why reduced visual input plays a powerful role in nighttime calm. Light does more than help us see. It tells the brain what time it is. During the day, bright light keeps the mind oriented outward. It sharpens focus, supports alertness, encourages action. The brain reads brightness as a signal. It is time to be active. As light fades, the signal changes. The brain begins to prepare for rest, Not suddenly, not forcefully, gradually. Dim light reduces visual information. Fewer details compete for attention. Edges soften, shadows appear. The mind no longer needs to process as much. When visual input decreases, thought changes character. It becomes less analytical, less linear, more associative. Ideas connect loosely, memories blend, emotions feel closer to the surface. This is why thinking at night often feels different, not worse, different. The brain is no longer optimized for precision, it is optimized for reflection. Bright light encourages problem solving. Dim light encourages meaning making. One is not better than the other. They serve different purposes. Light also affects chemistry. As brightness decreases, melatonin production increases. This hormone does not cause sleep directly. It creates the conditions for it. The body becomes receptive. Dim light also reduces pressure. The world feels smaller, safer, contained. The mind responds to this sense of enclosure. It loosens its grip. This is why harsh lighting feels uncomfortable at night. It sends a mixed signal. The environment says rest, the light says remain alert. The brain responds with tension. Soft, steady light tells a consistent story. Nothing urgent is happening. Nothing needs immediate attention. Over time, the brain learns these cues. A lamp instead of overhead lighting. Warm tones instead of sharp brightness. These details shape thought quietly. Dim light does not push the mind toward sleep, it invites it. As visual demands fade, attention turns inward. Thought slows, emotion settles. The mind becomes receptive to letting go. In the next chapter, we'll explore the moment when the mind begins to release control, and what happens in the space just before sleep arrives. The moment the mind begins to let go. There is a moment at night that is easy to miss. It is not sleep, and it is not wakefulness. It sits quietly between the two. At this point, the mind begins to change its relationship with control. During the day, control is constant, thoughts are guided, attention is directed, decisions are made deliberately. But as night deepens, that effort becomes harder to maintain. Not because the mind is failing, but because it no longer needs to hold everything together. The brain starts to loosen its grip. Thoughts become less structured, sentences trail off, images appear without context, logic softens. This can feel strange the first few times you notice it, as if something is slipping. But nothing is being lost. The mind is simply transitioning. In this state, attention becomes unstable. It drifts. It attaches briefly, then releases. A thought appears. It dissolves. Another takes its place. Not because the mind is distracted, but because it is no longer organizing itself tightly. This is the moment when control becomes unnecessary. The brain no longer needs to predict the next moment. There are no tasks ahead, no decisions waiting. So prediction slows. Neuroscientists sometimes describe this state as the edge of sleep, but it is more accurate to think of it as the edge of effort. The brain begins to move in fragments, images without meaning, sounds without source, memories without time. This is not dreaming yet. It is preparation. Many people try to hold on to clarity here. They notice the drift and try to pull themselves back, to think clearly again, to regain structure. But this effort delays rest. Letting go does not mean forcing sleep. It means allowing the mind to stop managing itself. In this state, thoughts lose their authority. They no longer demand response. They appear, and then they move on. The mind stops following them. This is often when the body begins to feel heavier. Muscles release. Breathing deepens without intention. The boundary between physical sensation and thought becomes less distinct. Some people experience brief images, faces, places, moments that never fully form. They arrive incomplete, and they leave the same way. This is the mind practicing sleep. learning how to disconnect gently. Emotion changes here as well. Feelings lose their sharpness. Even difficult memories feel distant, not because they are resolved, but because emotional intensity requires alertness, and alertness is fading. The mind no longer evaluates, it no longer judges, it simply observes, and then, eventually, it stops observing too. This moment can feel peaceful, or strange, or slightly disorienting. All of these are normal. They are signs that the mind is no longer holding the day together. Control is useful when action is required. At night, it becomes unnecessary weight. So the brain sets it down. Nothing needs to be solved here. Nothing needs to be understood. The mind has done enough. And when the need for control disappears, sleep does not need to be chased. It arrives on its own. This is not a moment to notice too closely. Awareness itself begins to soften. The edges blur. Thought slows beyond language. And somewhere beyond this point, the mind finally rests. Letting the night carry the rest underscore. At some point, the night takes over on its own. Thoughts become quieter. Awareness softens. The effort of holding everything together fades. There's nothing you need to do for this to happen. Nothing you need to remember. If your mind is still awake, that's fine. The night is not in a hurry. And if sleep has already begun to arrive, that's fine too. The mind already knows how to rest. Sometimes it simply waits for permission to stop trying. Everything that appeared tonight was part of a natural rhythm. The thoughts, the memories, the quiet moments in between. None of them needed fixing. When the world slows, the mind follows. And when the mind no longer needs to follow anything, it releases itself. Wherever you are now, awake or drifting, nothing more is required. The night will carry the rest. Good night.